Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver. Is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to February. Doesn't it seem like we have just been moving so fast? A lot has happened. I do want to just take some time and recognize those families who have lost loved ones in DC and Philadelphia. My heart definitely aches for you. Sending prayers. I just can't even imagine what some of you may be experiencing in this very challenging time. I know there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of anxiety and just grief and pain. So definitely send in love you all's way. It just seems like we're in that season still of a lot of grief and loss. I feel like November through February just seems to be more concentrated, though I know grief and loss happen throughout the year. But just thinking about people and definitely sending you all love and hugs during what is a challenging season for a lot of people. So, as I thought about the series for this month, I already knew it was going to be relationship focused. Relationships still are my number one requested topic, all things relationships. Uh, and with this month also being Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, people celebrate loving relationships during this month with friends and partners. I did already have in mind relationships, but one of the things that I wanted to do this month too is bring back the opportunities for the live discussions. I think that people like to be able to just kind of log in and ask questions, be able to get more information, and just be a bit more engaged. So, for the last 3 weeks of this month, you are going to have an opportunity to do that. We in week two we'll see the return of Brother Lewis York, who is a professional counselor, and he is going to be talking about, I think, one of the toughest topics of a season, which is after you've experienced a divorce or after a relationship didn't work out, and perhaps you've got a lot of residual left over from that. Maybe that it just didn't end really well. It was kind of contentious ending, but also you may just really have realized how much of yourself you needed to work on. Sometimes we can lose ourselves a lot in relationships, and I think also at times we are reevaluating what we were taught early on in our lives about relationships, what that foundation is for relationships. Brother York and I are going to be talking about that specifically for men. Where does that foundation come from? How do you learn to be in a loving relationship as a man? And then when you have experiences with partners that doesn't necessarily align with that, or you realize that how you've approached relationships hasn't afforded you the opportunity to have the reciprocity you want, need, and deserve. But then also being able to find love in relationships again, like being able to heal and get on the other side of that. So that's what Brother York and I will be talking about in week two. In week three, I'm going to have the ladies back, Reverend Amarylis West and Ebony Young. And we're just going to be talking about the dating plan because I think a lot of times people are struggling with hearing so much information about like dating. What does that look like? How is that healthy for us to have these standards or then not have standards? I think people are really struggling. I hear a good bit particularly from women, about people saying my standards are too high, I'm too picky, that's why I'm not in a relationship, or this kind of negative information about once you get to be a certain age, if you're not in a committed relationship or married by that time, it's not happening for you. So that one's going to be focused specifically on the ladies and talking about the dating scene and just how dating has changed and how to honor yourself and your needs, and as we talked about previously on an episode of The Great Girlfriends, not continuing to move that goalpost when things don't work out in the way that maybe we wanted them to. And then we're going to finish the month with the return of Dr. Sean Cook. Dr. Sean Cook is all things healthy, physical fitness, but also just relationships, spiritual relationships, but also family relationships. And we're going to be just talking about what does a healthy family look like, as particularly as parents, healthy men, being fathers, being husbands. Like, what does that look like for you all raising children, being able to be loving parts of your children's lives and not. I hear a lot of men in particular talk about the challenge of feeling like they're just in that disciplinarian support provider role, and that it doesn't necessarily make space for other things, or this kind of feeling disrespected in the family. And what does that look like, navigating that in healthy ways, and what does healthy look like? Because again, a lot of information out there from people, and some of it may be also based on what we saw growing up. And is that a healthy foundation, and do we want to maintain that foundation, or do we want to make some adjustments? So you have an opportunity to submit questions. You can drop them on my social media pages for those respective dates. Flyer will be coming out also to give you an opportunity to drop your questions in. So today I wanted to really set up to help us in preparation for this ongoing conversation is what it actually looks like to reevaluate how we approach relationships as we're grieving and healing from losses. Some of you have been widowed, and you may be thinking about getting back out there and dating. Some of you may say, I don't really want to date, but I would like to have, maybe more healthy relationships because my partner may have been that primary relationship, and I'm looking to try to build other relationships. Some of you may be just in transitional seasons in your life where people that you were close to have just moved away, or maybe you're in a newer area and you don't have those connections and trying to build that. So I want to just lay that foundation for today about what it looks like. So, how do we start that? One, I think it's really important to always evaluate what you have learned about any type of relationship growing up. What did you learn about friendships? What did you learn about who you are as a friend? What did you learn about being a daughter, a son? What was the foundation in your family for how people were treated based on gender? Because that does matter. Are you in a family where there was open communication, where we addressed problems, where things came up, and we took the time to talk through them and come up with strategies and suggestions? Or were you in a family where things were swept under the carpet and we didn't discuss it? Did you grow up in a family where there was assertive communication, again, open floor, direct, or did you grow up in a family where there might have been passive aggressive communication, where people didn't actually really say what they needed, but they would make these little snide comments to try to, might have been manipulation, it might have been obligatory relationships, guilt based kinds of things that might have showed up? Was it an aggressive type of family environment where people were demeaned and dismissed? And maybe there was some physical violence, right? So being able to understand that. Did you feel invisible growing up in your family? Did you feel like when you did try to speak up, then people shut that down, or you weren't believed? So there are a lot of different things that could have contributed to how you show up in a relationship, how you communicate in a relationship, how you problem solve in a relationship, and what your skills are in a relationship are. I think a lot of times people in general struggle with communication in relationships because that's such a refined skill and it takes time to build. Maybe you in your early relationships just didn't have a lot of variety of people that you're around, because again, we do what we see. And so if you're around the same types of people, then you're going to engage in the same types of communication. There are people that you'll ask them like, oh, hey, well, what are your needs? What do you want in a relationship? And they have a hard time articulating that because they've never had anyone give them a space to be able to really process that and think about it. How do you like to be loved? How do you want people to show up for you in a friendship, in a relationship? People sometimes struggle with that. Or we have like these very lofty, high, unrealistic expectations that are informed by a lot of different things. And I tell people that social media should not necessarily be your guide for how relationships look, particularly if you're not getting information from licensed professionals who are talking to you about appropriate boundaries and navigating the challenges that come along with relationships. It is true that you're not going to get everything that you want, but that doesn't mean that you have to lose yourself or settle for things that feel uncomfortable, or that settle for things that make you feel as if you don't matter, and that people can kind of pick you up and put you down at their leisure, right? But being able to navigate that and feel safe enough to be able to stand on that in a relationship can be really challenging, particularly if you haven't had opportunities where that was true. Being able to know what is realistic sometimes is also tough, because like we have a lot of our own kind of needs that may have been unmet growing up. And so we may be looking to other people to fill those needs and voids, which can be very challenging. Like some people have that codependent pattern in a relationship where they want that constant time and attention. And if that is something that both people want, that may be able to be, realistic, but that is often not the case. Truth be told, most codependent people get involved with people that aren't codependent, which is where the challenges come from. You may have had problems with trust in relationships from your family of origin and friendships and relationships throughout your life. And so when you have that mistrust and that insecurity about whether somebody's going to be there, like you can definitely engage in behaviors that put a lot of strain on a person to constantly be validating you or explaining things to you, because no matter what they do, you still don't trust them. It's never enough. Sometimes we're in relationships with people where we don't have the same values, we don't have the same expectations, and we definitely don't have the same types of areas of need. And again, we won't be exactly similar, but in general, as we know, like attracts like, and that tends to work out better when we have similar foundations. But when we're choosing partners, we're often choosing them based on our wounds. And so we're picking people that are going to end up repeating some of the wounds we have in our life. So if I'm not trustworthy, or I'm not trusting rather of people because I've not had people show up for me in my life, I'm going to tend to pick people who aren't trustworthy, which is again going to repeat that cycle. We also, the relationships of convenience, people who are close in proximity to us, people who work with us, people in our neighborhood, people who we may know from other areas of our life. That may be somebody we've done business with, but those tend to be people that we're much more likely to get involved in relationships with because they're there. Much like your first friends were likely people that you were in class with. You might still have your favorite kindergarten friend, that's your friend now, that you all met back in K. So I think a lot of times, as we're really thinking about what it means to be in a healthy relationship, we're operating out of old models and we haven't really adjusted them. Some of us are not great partners with regard to, like, we are used to being self-focused. So I do what I want, when I want, how I want, spend how I want, not usually talking to people about it. And that is sometimes, I think, misconstrued as, oh, you independent, you don't need a person, as opposed to I'm used to being able to operate in the space of I make the decisions. When things fall apart, I got to put them together. When things are needed, I got to figure out how to get them taken care of. And so it's not necessarily that a person doesn't want partnership, but that they don't have the skills to be able to be a partner. And so sometimes we have to go and do that work of addressing, like, what does it even mean to be a partner? And looking at it as if, like, I've heard people say, I don't need a person. That's not the way to approach a relationship. That philosophy oftentimes is very defeating in a relationship, because by virtue of the fact that I'm wanting to engage with you, there is something that I desire from you. So there is a need. Now, does that mean that I can't afford to take care of myself and I can't afford to take care of the things in my life? No, but that also doesn't equate to I don't need a person. And so sometimes, unfortunately, because of how we were oriented to relationships, and I know for a lot of women, that came from, you know, past relationships where perhaps a person was completely dependent on someone. And because they were completely dependent, they didn't have a voice. And so what they did is they told you, hey, always make sure you have your own so you can have a voice, so nobody will be telling you what you can and can't do, so you won't be trapped and have to stay in something. And I understand that that is very much a protective mechanism, it's a safety mechanism, but also if I apply that broadly to a relationship, it can make it very difficult for anyone to connect with me or me to be able to connect with anyone. So being able to really challenge some of those things. Some of us just are really confused about roles in a relationship, and we think that a person is supposed to do things. As opposed to people choose to do things because of how they invest in the relationship, and that we don't want to take that for granted or take advantage of that or misuse that in any way, because again, we want to approach the relationship from that partnership perspective. Some of us, again, we've talked about, don't receive feedback really well, and it's difficult for us to be able to hear things about ourselves or have people come to us and say that we have hurt them in some way, or that our needs aren't being met, and then we get defensive and critical, and attacking because we feel like we're being told that we're not enough, and we take that very personally instead of being able to understand, like, hey, like, sometimes my efforts may not necessarily match what your needs are. They just may be a place where I'm comfortable, and some of us operate in relationships from our place of comfort, and that's not the same as setting healthy boundaries as much as it is like, oh, I'll give you what I feel comfortable giving you, and I don't really care about what you need. As opposed to, boundaries come from the place of being able to be healthy in engagement and understanding, that we do have some things that are important for us to be open and honest about, with regard to how we need to be treated and what feels respectful to us and what feels like good body boundaries, and that it is a reciprocal kind of relationship. There are a lot of perspectives with regard to who should provide the majority of the income in the family, navigating sexual boundaries in the relationship, cooking, housekeeping, yard work, all of these things. And it's important to understand that these could look different in different relationships, but that because you get to create, organize, structure, design the type of relationship that works best for you. And people will, if you give people too much opportunity to know the dynamics of your relationship, people will have a lot of commentary about it, and which also can sow seeds of discord. And so, even being able to navigate the piece of how do I manage being in healthy relationships with people, but not putting that relationship in jeopardy by what I'm sharing with other people. I really talk to people a good bit about having safe spaces for you to be able to address things that are going on in your relationship with people you both have agreed upon, who are understanding their assignment is to nurture and support you in being the healthiest version you can be in your relationship, instead of you going to gossip to your friends and family members who then feel emboldened to come and address your partner. That's not appropriate, right? Like, we need to be able to create spaces for therapy, create spaces again for those marriage and relationship accountability partners who are going to focus on us on addressing the dynamics that are at play, instead of taking sides and trying to chastise people. The more you involve folks in your relationship, the more opportunity there is for you to have chaos in your relationship. And honestly, this is how affairs can get started, because now somebody sees there's a kink in the armor and they know where to get in, where the soft spot is. And next thing you know, a situation has occurred. It also is an opportunity for people to just not tell the truth and create things that aren't even going on in the relationship, that then takes away from that trust foundation in the security and safety. And frankly, like, it is quite embarrassing to have all of your information out on blast in these streets because people have loose lips. And I don't know why folks think that when you tell people things that they are going to keep them in confidence all the time, when you know this person is a gossiper. And now with social media, people will send your information out. They'll take videos and pictures you send them and share them, and do all kinds of things. So being able to recognize that piece too, like, how do we create spaces to hold each other accountable, to be able to share with each other, to be able to grow, and do so in ways that aren't going to ever embarrass our partners or put our relationship in jeopardy. And also, that speaks to people being open to going to counseling. And I will tell people, that if a person isn't willing to go to counseling, then what are your options for when you get stuck? You're going to get stuck. There are going to come times in your life where the skills that you have are not going to necessarily be able to get you through every challenging situation. And so if you've limited yourself to it's just going to be us, then we're limited to whatever options we can come up with. So when I'm mad at you and I can't see straight, and all I see is venom, then what's going to allow me to get out of that space? Which is why couples end up being in these patterns for so long, and they feel overwhelmed and powerless to change them because they've limited themselves. They boxed themselves in. They don't have any other options. And then I will also say to you the importance of establishing whatever your boundaries are going to be and to over communicate about that. They change over time. What might have been a boundary for you in your 20s may not be a boundary needed in your 40s. But also being able to know that every time you get in a relationship, people need the operations manual. They need orientation. How do they show up for you? How do they love you? What's important to you? What do you value? What are your non negotiables? And I think we get frustrated with people when they don't meet our needs that we've never explained to them. And the most common thing I hear is they should know by now. And I tell people all the time, unless they can read minds, no, they shouldn't. Right. And so communicating to people, and this goes back to that being the area of most challenge in relationships, tends to be very difficult. I've seen people try to have, meaningful conversations via text when there's so much that's going to be lost in that context. Or the silent treatment or the stonewalling, holding grudges. And so then things build up and then we explode. Right. And so being able to navigate that, being able to navigate the kids. Bringing kids into a relationship, and we already have challenges with our communication, and we're struggling. Like, what's that gonna look like? Our co-parenting, what that looks like. Being able to date when you may have children, maybe from a previous relationship. So these things are often not addressed in enough detail early on. And so then we start off with these bad patterns. And then, as you know, it's harder to change things when you've created negative patterns from the start. So these are the kind of things that we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. And so as you're thinking about what you want to address, the questions you may have that you want to pose to our live guests, then these are the areas where there's some good time for some exploration. But also, if you're in this position where you're getting ready to date, or you're maybe in a new relationship, or you just got out of a relationship, this is a really good time for you to think about some of those areas that I just discussed and figure out, okay, where are my wounds? Where are the areas where I'm challenged? What were some of the things that contributed to the last relationship not working out? Or if I've had a dating plan and it hasn't really materialized to any, uh, you know, progress, I would say, in terms of me getting out meeting people, or me meeting the types of people that can be good partners, then I may need to be reevaluating that. Here's your plug for therapy. And it may be that I need to go and address some things in therapy, my communication pattern, my choices in partners, me grieving, ending the loss of something, me wanting to start something new, and recreating that foundation, because I recognize that what it was built on last time isn't sufficient to be able to give me what I need moving forward. Maybe I've changed, I've grown. But also, maybe there are some people in your life, relationship wise, that you need to move away from because they're doing things that are destructive. They're engaging in patterns that are not consistent with who you want to be. And so you might want to change your support system. You may be looking at your friend group now and thinking, like, people have not shown up for me in a long time. Like, why do I still have them on the roster when I haven't seen them at practice in 3 years? So I do think it's important for us to do that part as well. Take a look. I always say take stock. Take stock, evaluate your current relationships, evaluate who you are in relationships, look at where there's some deficits, and then think about what you would need moving forward to create a plan, designing those relationships in a way that's going to allow you to be able to get what you need, or address some of the things that have interfered with you being able to show up in relationships in the way that other people deserve, because sometimes we are the problem. So, 'tis the season for us to be well in relationships with ourselves and other people. I look forward to seeing you on the lives the rest of this month. Again, a flyer will be forthcoming, so you'll know the topics and the dates and the times so you can be able to show up. All right, you all be well.